You touch the spawner's glass with those hands? Discussing.
Trevor Callahan lifted a full cup of soda above Brooke Anderson's head, and he poured slowly. He didn't rush. He wanted them to watch. The soda ran through her hair, down her forehead, past her closed eyes. It slid over her cheek, her collar, her plain gray dress. Brooke didn't move. She kept her eyes closed.
I was invited.
Cleaning staff doesn't get invited.
300 guests went still. Phones rose. A camera light blinked red. Someone near the back laughed.
There.
Trevor said.
Now you match the floor.
Brooke didn't gasp. She didn't run. She turned the thin gold ring on her finger once the way she always had. A single drop fell from her chin to the marble. Have you ever watched a room decide who mattered before knowing who she was? That single drop hit the marble at 8:11 that night. To understand how it got there, rewind 2 hours to a ballroom still almost empty. Brooke Anderson arrived before the crowd on purpose. She wore a plain gray dress and no jewelry that mattered except one thin ring. She wanted to watch the room the way most guests never did, from the edges, unnoticed. The banner above the stage read, Anderson Global Annual Charity Gala. Beneath it, smaller letters spelled a second name, the Brooke Anderson Foundation. Waiters passed it 100 times and never looked up. Tonight, the company would announce a partnership worth $200 million. Cameras lined the walls. The partners' team sat near the stage, watching everything. A live stream counter climbed in the corner, already thousands watching. Trevor Callahan ran the floor like a man auditioning for a bigger job. He was the event manager, 32 sharp suit, sharper temper. Tonight had to be flawless. Tonight was his night. He spotted Brooke near the sponsor tables and saw only a problem. You! Gray dress! He snapped his fingers. Temp staff clears glasses. Start with that table and don't touch the guests' drinks. Brooke looked at him for a moment. Then she picked up an empty glass. She could have said her name. She didn't. She wanted to see how far it would go. It went far. Trevor watched her work and smirked at a colleague. They send me anyone these days. Preston Vance laughed. As long as they stay quiet. Nearby, a young coordinator named Nora Whitfield frowned but said nothing yet. She was new. She still believed someone above her would fix it. Brooke set the glass down and studied the room. Servers kept their eyes low. Guests in tailored suits stepped around them like furniture. Nobody said thank you. Nobody said please. She had built part of this company on one promise that no one under its roof would be treated as invisible. Standing there invisible, she saw the promise had a crack in it. She didn't yet know how wide that crack would open, and almost no one knew the simplest, most dangerous fact in the room. The founder was already inside, and he never let anyone touch his wife. For the first hour, the cruelty stayed small. Trevor kept Brooke moving. Clear this, wipe that. Stand there, no, not there. Every order came with a look that said she was less. She carried empty glasses and said nothing. She was counting not the insults, but the people who noticed and chose silence. By 8 o'clock, the ballroom was full. 300 guests, investors, reporters, a senator's aide, the partners' whole team. The live stream counter passed 10,000. Trevor felt every camera like a spotlight, and he wanted the floor to look perfect. In his mind, Brooke did not look perfect. She looked like a mistake near his big night. He walked over as she cleared a table near the stage. Stop, he held out his hand. Your invitation, now. It's in my bag, Brooke said. Of course it is. He didn't wait. He reached into the small bag on her shoulder and pulled the card out himself. He read it. His face flickered just for a second, then hardened. This is a printing error, he said loud enough for the nearest tables. You people photocopy these and walk right in. That card is real, Brooke said. Sure it is. He tore it once, then again, and let the pieces fall. There, problem solved. The nearest tables laughed. Not everyone, but enough. Trevor fed on it. He stepped back and looked Brooke up and down slow, like he was pricing her. Look at this, he said to the crowd. The dress, the hair. Who let this near a $200 million night? Brooke said nothing. Her hands stayed folded. Her breathing stayed even. Nothing to say? Good. The quiet ones clean faster. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a few crumpled bills, and held them out like bait. Here, a tip. For the show. He let the bills drop at her feet. Pick it up. That's what it's there for. Brooke looked at the money on the floor. She did not bend. I'll leave it for whoever needs it, she said. Something in her calm made him angrier. A man like Trevor needed the fear. Without it, he only had the audience, and the audience was starting to feel the wrongness in the room. A waiter near the bar stopped pouring. Nora Whitfield took one step forward. Mr. Callahan, Nora said, maybe we should— Did I ask you? Trevor snapped. You want to carry her tray? Keep talking. There are 20 girls who'd take your badge tonight. Nora froze. She looked at Brooke. Brooke gave the smallest shake of her head. Don't. Not for me. Not like this. Trevor turned back to Brooke. He needed a finish. Something the cameras would remember. On the head table sat a tall glass half full of dark soda, the sponsor's drink left by his seat. Brooke reached to clear it the way she'd been told to clear everything else. That was all he needed. You touched the sponsor's glass with those hands. His voice cracked across the hall. Disgusting. He took the glass from her before she could set it down. He lifted it above her head. And he poured slowly. He didn't rush. He wanted them to watch. The soda ran through her hair, down her forehead, past her closed eyes. It slid over her cheek, her collar, her plain gray dress. It dripped from her folded hands to the marble. Brooke didn't move. She kept her eyes closed. I was invited, she said. He kept pouring until the glass was empty. Cleaning staff doesn't get invited. The room went still. Phones rose in 100 hands. The camera light blinked red. Someone near the back laughed high and nervous. There, Trevor said. Now you match the floor. He wasn't done. Down, he said. On your knees. Wipe it up. You made the mess. You clean it. Brooke opened her eyes. Soda ran off her lashes. She looked at him, not with hate, not with fear, just a long, level look that made a few guests glance away. Then she knelt. Not because he told her to. She would say later she knelt to pick up the pieces of her own torn invitation still scattered on the floor. But the room saw a woman on her knees, soaked, while a man in a good suit stood over her and smiled for the phones. For a moment, nobody helped. 300 people, investors who ran cities, reporters paid to notice things, the partners team who had flown in to sign a deal about shared values. Every one of them watched a woman kneel in spilled soda, and every one of them found a reason to look away, at a drink, a phone, their shoes. That is the part Brooke would remember most. Not the cold soda, not Trevor, the silence. The way a room full of powerful people can agree without a word that one person does not count. She reached for a torn corner of her invitation and set it in her palm. Her ring caught the light. Nobody saw the ring. They only saw the hands. Trevor crouched beside her close and lowered his voice so only the front tables caught it. You should have stayed home, he said. People like you always think you can walk into rooms like this. Then he stood and raised his voice again, playing the host. Somebody get her a rag. Actually, he picked the crumpled bills off the floor and tossed them into the puddle beside her knee. There. Now you've earned it. The bills soaked through and went dark. Near the head table, Nora crouched too. She wasn't cleaning. She was reading a small white card propped by the center seat. It said in quiet letters, Reserved, B. Anderson. She looked at the soaked woman on the floor. She looked at the card. Her mouth opened, then closed. Nora slid her phone from her pocket and with a shaking thumb started to record. On her knees, Brooke did something the cameras almost missed. She wiped the floor, slowly, carefully. She lined the torn pieces of her invitation in a neat row on her wet palm. It was a woman refusing to leave even her own name in the dirt. Her face stayed calm. Her hands did not shake. People mistook that calm for weakness. It was the opposite. 20 years earlier, Brooke had cleaned rooms exactly like this one. Real ones. She had carried trays, emptied bins, and been called "you" by men who never learned her name. She had promised herself something back then, that if she ever had power, no one under her roof would feel this small. Then she met a quiet man building a company on the same idea. They married in a small room with 8 guests. They built the rest together. Her name went on the foundation. His name went on the door. And they made one strange rule between them, that every year one of them would walk their own halls unknown just to see the truth. Tonight was her turn. So she was not afraid of Trevor. She was studying him, and she was studying every silent face that let him keep going. The strangest part was how ordinary the room stayed. Waiters kept refilling glasses. The band, unsure, played on softly, then stopped, then started again. A man at table 3 checked his watch, annoyed not at Trevor, but at the delay. To him, Brooke was weather, something to wait out. At table 1, an older investor named Walter Boyd looked like he might stand. His wife put a hand on his arm. He sat back down. Later, he would tell a reporter he didn't want to make it worse. Later still, he would not be able to explain what it was. A young server, barely 20, gripped a tray so hard his knuckles whitened. He knew exactly how Brooke felt. He had been the "you" in 100 rooms. But he had rent due, and a manager who fired people for less than kindness. So he looked at the floor and hated himself for it. That was Trevor's real weapon, not the soda, the math. He had taught an entire room that decency was expensive and silence was free. Brooke saw all of it. She saw the server's white knuckles. She saw Walter sit down. She saw a woman near the stage crying while she filmed. She did both at once, as if the phone made her a witness instead of a bystander. And she saw Nora, young, terrified badge on a lanyard she couldn't afford to lose, hold her phone steady and refuse to look away. Of everyone in that ballroom, the person with the least power was the only one using hers. Trevor mistook the silence for a green light. "Still here," he said to Brooke. "I said clean and go. Do you need me to spell it?" He nudged the soaked bills toward her with the toe of his shoe. "Take your tip. Take the hint. People like you don't get second invitations." Brooke looked at the young server, then at Nora, and made a small decision. She would let this run one more minute, not for herself, for every silent face that needed to see where this road actually ended. Because she knew something the room didn't. She knew who was parking his car outside. She knew whose name was really on that torn card. And she knew that in about 90 seconds, the man smiling for the cameras was going to wish he had never learned the word disgusting. At the sponsor table, the deal was already cracking. The partner's lead had come to sign with a company that talked about dignity in every slide. Now she watched a manager pour soda on a woman for sport. She set down her pen. She leaned to the man beside her and whispered one line. "Are these the shared values?" A reporter by the wall lowered her glass and lifted her phone. This was no longer a gala. This was a story, and it was climbing past 20,000 viewers by the second. Comments scrolled faster than anyone could read. "Who is she? Somebody help her. Where is security? Where is management?" Management was the problem. Management was pouring the soda. The live stream number kept climbing. Somewhere out there, a clip was already being cut, captioned, and shared. By morning, it would have a name. Tonight, it only had a victim, a bully, and 300 witnesses who did nothing. Trevor felt the shift in the room. He did not understand it. He thought the quiet meant respect. He thought the phones meant fans. He had spent his whole career reading rooms wrong and being promoted anyway. He was loud, and loud looks like confidence from a distance. So he did what always worked. He pushed harder. "You know what, I don't think you're staff at all," he said, circling her. "I think you snuck in. I think you saw a room full of rich people and figured you'd help yourself." He turned to the crowd, arms wide. "Check your wallets, folks. Check your bags. We've got a guest who doesn't belong and won't say why." It was a lie, and some in the room knew it. But a lie said loudly in a nice suit is hard to fight from the floor. Brooke rose to her feet. Soda dripped from the hem of her dress. She did not raise her voice. She spoke so evenly that people leaned in. "You've called me a thief," she said, "in front of 300 people and a camera. I want you to remember that you chose that word." For half a second, Trevor blinked. Then he laughed because blinking scared him. "Is that a threat from you?" He looked around, grinning. "Did everyone hear that? The cleaning lady's going to sue me!" A few nervous laughs, fewer than before. The room was tilting, and only Brooke seemed to feel exactly how far. Nora stepped forward again, phone still recording, voice shaking but clear. "She's telling the truth," Nora said. "I saw her card. Her name is—" "One more word," Trevor snapped, "and you're both leaving in handcuffs." He raised his hand and snapped his fingers toward the doors. "Security! Now! Get this out of my ballroom before it costs me the account!" Two guards peeled off the wall and started toward her. Brooke didn't move. She had one more thing to see how far this room would let it go. The guards reached her in 6 steps. They were not cruel men. They were tired men in cheap blazers doing what the loudest voice in the room told them to do. One took her left arm. The other reached for her right. "Easy," Brooke said. "I'll walk." "She's not staff, and she's not a guest," Trevor announced loud for the phones. "That makes her a trespasser, maybe a thief. We'll let the police sort out which." He was performing now, and the performance had an audience of thousands. "Escort her out. If she resists, we press charges. I want it on record that Anderson Global does not tolerate people like this." The word people did a lot of work in that sentence. Everyone heard it. Nobody said it back to him. Nora tried one last time. She stepped into the guard's path, phone still up. "Her card said Anderson," Nora said. "Just look at the card, please." Trevor didn't even turn. "Whitfield, you're suspended. Give your badge to the desk on your way out." He smiled. "You want to defend strangers? Do it on your own time." Nora's face crumpled. Her hands shook, but she did not lower the phone. Trevor scanned the rest of the staff, daring anyone else. "Anyone want to join her, no good? Then get back to work." The young server looked at Brooke. For 1 second, his grip loosened on his tray like a man about to set down a weight he was tired of carrying. Then he thought of his rent. He turned away. One by one, the room chose Trevor. Not because they agreed with him, because he was the one who could still hurt them. Trevor leaned close to Brooke, voice low again, private. "When they walk you out that door, it's over," he said. "You'll never work in this city again. I'll make sure of it. One call." He said it like a man who had ended people before and enjoyed it. They walked her toward the doors. The march was slow and the room watched every step. Soda dripped from her sleeve and marked the marble behind her, a thin trail like the floor was keeping score. No one wiped it up. No one dared. This was the loneliest moment of the night. Not the soda, not the kneeling. This. The long walk out past 300 people who had decided she was no one. A stranger's hand on each arm, a camera drifting alongside her face. Brooke kept her chin level. She turned the ring on her finger once. She thought of the man who gave it to her and how he always said the same thing before he walked into a hard room. Let them show you who they are first. They had. All of them. Across the ballroom, someone was not watching Brooke. She was watching Trevor. Diane Prescott had run operations for Anderson Global for 9 years. She knew every face that mattered in the company, and she had just realized, with a cold drop in her stomach, exactly whose face was under the soda. She did not shout. She did not run. She lifted her phone, pressed one contact, and said 4 words into it. "You need to come. Now!" Then Diane began to move toward the doors, fast cutting through the crowd. Something was changing, and Trevor could feel it on his skin. The laughter had stopped. The phones had not. A gala runs on a kind of permission, everyone agreeing to enjoy themselves. That permission was draining out of the room like air from a slow leak. At table 1, Walter Boyd stood up. This time his wife didn't stop him. "Son," he called to Trevor, "that's enough. Whatever she did or didn't do, that's enough." "Sir, please sit down," Trevor said. "This doesn't concern you." "It concerns all of us," Walter said. "That's the problem." A few people clapped. Not many, but a minute ago it had been none, and Trevor heard the difference. Fear was leaving the room, and fear was the only thing that ever made him tall. So he did the thing frightened men do. He rushed. "Move!" he told the guards. "Get her out, now, before this turns into a scene!" It was already a scene. It had been a scene for 9 minutes, watched by 40,000 strangers who were at that very moment typing her story into the world. The guards walked faster. Brooke's shoes slid a little on the wet floor. One guard steadied her gently, almost an apology, and for a second their eyes met and he looked ashamed. "Sorry, ma'am," he murmured too low for Trevor to hear. "It's all right," Brooke said. "You're not the one who has to answer for tonight." The doors were 20 feet away, then 15. Trevor walked ahead of the guards now, leading the way out, eager to be rid of her before the room fully turned. He was already rehearsing the story he'd tell an unstable woman, a security matter handled. He believed the way men like him always believe, that the version with the microphone wins. "Keep the camera off her face," he called to no one. "This is a private event." 40,000 people disagreed. 10 feet. Brooke looked back once over her shoulder at the ballroom. She wasn't looking for rescue. She was memorizing it. The silent tables, the crying woman with the phone, the young server who couldn't meet her eyes, Nora's suspended badge already gone, still filming with both hands, and Walter Boyd standing alone, the one man out of 300 who had said the word enough. She would remember who stood. She would remember who sat. Not for revenge, for repair. Because tomorrow all of this would be hers to fix, and she would need to know exactly where the cracks ran. Near the doors, Trevor made his final mistake of the night, though he wouldn't know it for another minute. He wanted a clean ending, a last word for the cameras. So he stepped in front of Brooke and blocked her path, one hand raised. "Before you go," he said loud again, "let's all remember what this was. A nobody in a cheap dress crashing a real event thinking she belonged. Take a good look, everyone. This is what entitlement looks like." He turned to her, smiling, certain he'd won. "Anything to say for yourself, no? Didn't think so. People like you never do once the cameras are on." Brooke met his eyes. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet, but it carried to every corner of the silent room. "I have one thing to say," she said. "You should have asked my name." Trevor laughed. "And why would I ever do that?" "Because," Brooke said, "in about 30 seconds it's the only name in this room that's going to matter." For the first time all night, Trevor felt something cold move through him. He didn't know why. He told himself she was bluffing. A soaped woman with a torn invitation had nothing. Then he saw the guard's eyes lift toward the doors behind him. He saw the whole room lift with them, and he turned around. He turned into chaos he didn't understand. 5 feet away, Diane Prescott had reached the guards. "Let go of her," she said. "Right now." Trevor started to snap back, then saw the badge on her lanyard, and the color drained from his face by half. "Ms. Prescott, this is under control." "It is the furthest thing from under control," Diane said, "that I have ever seen in this building." And behind her, the double doors at the end of the hall stood open. A man had walked in. Quiet, ordinary, the kind of man you'd pass without a glance. Trevor had never met him, but Diane straightened like a soldier. Somewhere in the crowd, a guest whispered a name, and the whisper spread like a crack across ice. For a moment, nobody moved. The man in the doorway was not what a room expects power to look like. No entourage, no flashbulb smile, gray suit, no tie, the calm of someone who has never once had to raise his voice to be obeyed. He was Everett Anderson. He had founded the company whose name hung over the stage. In 19 years, he had given exactly 2 interviews and posed for almost no photographs. He liked it that way. He believed a company should be known for what it did, not for his face. Which was why not one person in that ballroom recognized him except the few who ran it. Diane Prescott exhaled like a woman who had been holding her breath for 10 minutes. Everett didn't look at her. He didn't look at the stage or the cameras or the $200 million waiting to be announced. He looked at one thing. The woman by the doors soaked in soda, a guard's hand still on each arm. And the temperature of the whole room changed. He crossed the ballroom slowly, He was not a large man, but the room parted for him anyway, the way water moves for something it can't see the bottom of. Trevor tried to get ahead of it. He always did. "Sir, I'm sorry you walked into this," he said, stepping forward, smoothing his jacket. "We had a security situation. It's handled. If you're here for the announcement, we can—" Everett walked past him like he wasn't there. He stopped in front of Brooke. For a second, he just looked at her. The soda in her hair, the wet gray dress, the torn invitation still clutched in her hand. Something moved across his face that made grown investors look at the floor. Not anger, not yet. Something worse for Trevor. Grief and love, and a very quiet kind of fury. "Hi," Brooke said softly, like they were alone. "You're early." "Diane called," he said. "Are you hurt?" "No, just wet." He took off his jacket. Gently, he draped it over her shoulders, over the soaked dress. For one moment, the most powerful man in the building did the one thing 300 people had refused to do. He treated her like she mattered. Then he turned around. "My name is Everett Anderson," he said. He did not say it loudly. He didn't have to. The name landed on the room like a dropped glass, and 300 people heard it break. "I founded this company. My name is on the building you're standing in." He let that sit. "And the woman your manager just poured soda on, called a thief, and dragged toward the door is my wife." The word wife went through the ballroom like a current. "Brooke Anderson," he said, "co-founder of the Brooke Anderson Foundation. Her name is on the banner above your heads. Her signature is on the checks that paid for every glass of champagne in your hands tonight." Somewhere a woman gasped. A man swore under his breath. 40,000 viewers became 60,000 in the space of a sentence. Trevor's face did something Brooke would never forget. It tried 3 expressions at once: a laugh, a denial, an apology, and landed on none of them. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. "That's no," Trevor finally managed. She didn't say." "You didn't ask," Everett said. The change in the room was total, and it happened in seconds. The same guests who had looked away now stared straight at Trevor. The same phones that filmed a soaked woman for entertainment were filming a manager's face as it fell apart. A gala has a hierarchy invisible but absolute. Everyone had just watched the person at the bottom become the person at the top, and the man who used to be on top stood in a puddle of his own making. At the sponsor table, the partner quietly slid the unsigned contract back into her folder. The 2 guards let go of Brooke's arms at the same instant, as if her skin had suddenly become hot. One of them actually stepped back and lowered his head. Preston Vance had spent the last 10 minutes laughing at every one of Trevor's jokes. Now he discovered a deep interest in his own shoes. He began very slowly to drift backward into the crowd, as though distance could rewrite the last 10 minutes. It couldn't. Nora's camera had all of it. So did 40 other phones. Everett looked at the guards. "You can step away. She was never the problem." They went fast. Then he turned his eyes on Trevor, and for the first time he let a little of the fury show. "You had one job tonight," Everett said. "Make people feel welcome in a room my wife paid for. Instead, I walk in and find her on her knees in front of 300 people cleaning up a drink you threw. Mr. Anderson, I swear if I had known who she—" "That's the whole problem." Everett's voice stayed level, and somehow that was worse than shouting. "You didn't do this because you thought she was no one. You did this because you were sure no one would ever make you pay for it." The room was silent. Even the live stream comments seemed to hold their breath. "You were wrong about that too," Everett said. Brooke touched her husband's arm, a small signal one they'd used for years. "I've got this." She stepped forward, his jacket still around her shoulders, soda still drying in her hair. For the first time all night, the room leaned in to listen to her instead of laughing at her. She did not raise her voice. She didn't need the volume. She had something better. 300 people who suddenly desperately wanted to know what she would say. "An hour ago," Brooke began, "I asked one man in this room to let me clear a table because he told me to. I did everything I was asked, quietly, and I still ended up on my knees. She looked around the ballroom, slow, taking in every face. "Here's what I want you to understand. I'm okay. I have a husband who loves me, a company with my name on it, and a jacket that costs more than tonight's whole catering bill." A few people almost laughed, then didn't dare. "I could walk out of here and never think about this again." She let the pause stretch. "But the next woman won't have any of that. The next woman he treats like this will just be a temp in a gray dress, and she'll go home tonight believing that's all she's worth." Her voice never rose. It just got quieter and harder, like cooling steel. "So no, we're not going to pretend this was a misunderstanding." Then she turned to Trevor and asked him one question, the question the whole internet was already asking with her. "You called me a thief in front of the world," she said. "Now that you know my name, do you want to say it again?" Trevor said nothing. For once in his life, the man with the microphone had no version that could win. For a moment, the only sound was the soft electronic hum of 100 phones recording history. Then Everett spoke quietly to Diane Prescott, but the whole room heard. "Diane, as of right now, Mr. Callahan is not to touch anything in this building. Not a door, not a key card, not a single glass." He didn't look at Trevor. "We'll do the rest properly, in front of everyone, the same way he did it to her." Diane nodded once. She was already reaching for her phone. Trevor finally understood the shape of what was coming. He looked around the room he had ruled 10 minutes ago and found no allies left in it. Preston was gone. The guards were gone. The partner at the sponsor table had folded her arms. 300 people who had watched him pour soda on a woman were now watching him drown. Not one of them reached out a hand. He turned to Brooke, the last door he had left. "Please," he said, "this will ruin me." Brooke looked at him for a long moment. When she answered, there was no cruelty in it, and somehow that made it land harder. "I know exactly how that feels," she said. "You spent an hour teaching me." She pulled his own words back out of the air, gentle as a blade. "Now let's see what you do when the whole room is finally watching you." Behind her, Diane Prescott lowered her phone and gave a small nod. Everything was in motion. What came next would not happen in a back office or a quiet email or a settlement no one would ever read. It would happen here, on camera, in front of the 300 people who had stayed silent and the world that hadn't looked away. The reckoning was about to begin. It began with Diane Prescott walking to the stage. She was not a dramatic woman. She had spent 9 years making problems disappear quietly, and she clearly hated that this one had to happen out loud. But she took the microphone anyway because some things have to be said where everyone can hear them. "For those who don't know me, I'm Diane Prescott, Chief Operating Officer of Anderson Global." Her voice was steady. "I want to be very clear about what happens now because all of you and about 60,000 people online just watched what happened before." She looked at Trevor. "Trevor Callahan, your employment is terminated, effective immediately, for cause." The words hit him harder than the room had hit Brooke. He actually swayed. "You can't, there's a process," Trevor said. "A hearing, HR. You can't just—" "You poured a drink on a woman and forced her to her knees on camera at a charity event," Diane said. "The process is going to be very short." She nodded to the 2 guards who 10 minutes ago had been holding Brooke. "Please collect Mr. Callahan's badge and key card and walk him out. The same door. He knows the way." The guards did not touch him roughly. They didn't need to. They walked him toward the same doors he had tried to drag Brooke through. They passed the same 300 people and the same thin trail of soda still drying on the marble. No one laughed. That was the strange part. There was no cheering, no jeering, just a heavy watching silence, the sound of a room realizing it had been complicit and not knowing what to do with the feeling. Trevor stopped once at the doors and looked back at Brooke. Whatever he wanted to say, he didn't get to say it. The doors closed. He was gone. Then Diane's eyes found Preston Vance still trying to melt into the crowd. "Mr. Vance!" Preston froze. "You were beside him the whole time. You laughed. You encouraged it. We have all of it on camera." Diane didn't blink. "You're suspended without pay pending review. Go home. Do not speak to press on the company's behalf." Preston opened his mouth, thought better of it, and left. Two men who had felt untouchable an hour ago were now walking out into the cold. The only thing that had changed was that someone with power had finally decided to look. The night still had one more consequence to deliver, and it came from the sponsor table. The partner's lead, a woman named Grace Holloway, who had flown across the country to sign, stood up with her folder closed. "Mr. Anderson," she said, "I came here to announce a partnership. $200 million built on what your people called shared values." She glanced at the wet marble. "I've seen your values tonight, so I'm going to be honest with all these cameras." The room braced. "I'm not signing tonight," Grace said. "Not because of what that man did, but because for 10 full minutes, 300 professionals watched it and did nothing. That's not one bad manager. That's a culture, and I don't invest in a culture until I know it's changed." She sat down. $200 million sat down with her. Everett did not flinch. He nodded slowly the way a man nods at a bill he knows he has earned. "That's fair," he said. "I wouldn't sign with us tonight either." Then Brooke did the thing no one expected. She walked to the stage, still in the borrowed jacket, and asked Grace Holloway one question loud enough for the cameras. "Will you give us a year?" Grace tilted her head. "Don't sign tonight," Brooke said. "You're right not to, but come back in 12 months and look again. If we haven't changed, really changed, top to bottom, then you walk and you tell the world why. Deal." For a long moment, Grace studied her. Then slowly she nodded. "Deal." Brooke turned to the room. She did not gloat. She did not spike the ball. When she spoke, it was almost gentle, and that was what made 300 people sit very still. "I'm not telling you this story so you'll feel guilty," she said. "Guilt is cheap. It wears off by breakfast." She let that land. "I'm telling you because every one of you has been in a room where someone was treated like they didn't matter. And most of us do exactly what this room did tonight. We look at our shoes. We wait for someone braver. We tell ourselves it isn't our business." She found the young server near the wall. She found the crying woman. She found last Nora still holding her phone. "One person in this room didn't look away," Brooke said. "She's 24, she just got suspended for it, and she filmed the truth with both hands shaking. Her name is Nora Whitfield. Remember that one too." The room turned to Nora, and for the first time that night the applause was real, and it was loud, and it was for the right person. Nora cried. She didn't try to hide it. Brooke crossed the stage, took the young woman's shaking hands, and said something the microphone didn't catch, something that made Nora laugh through the tears. The suspension everyone understood without being told was over before it began. Everett watched his wife from the floor. If you looked closely, you could see it the same expression from the doorway, but turned all the way around. Not grief now. Pride. The gala never did announce its big deal. The stage lights stayed up on something the company hadn't scripted and couldn't have bought. A room full of powerful people finally quietly ashamed. And one woman in a soda-stained dress showing them the way out of it. Brooke stepped down from the stage. People reached out as she passed to apologize, to explain, to say they'd wanted to help. She took each hand. She didn't scold them. She just said the same thing over and over so many times it started to sound like a promise. "Next time," she said. "Do it next time." Some of them would. That was the point. By midnight, the clip had 6 million views. By morning, 100 million people would know Trevor Callahan's name and Brooke Anderson's. But the real story wasn't the pouring of the soda. The real story was what a company did the day after, and whether any of it was real. That part started the next morning. The next morning, Anderson Global did not send out a polished apology written by a law firm. Instead, Brooke and Everett walked into the building together, through the front doors, past the same lobby in front of the same staff, and got to work. By the end of the week, the changes were real and they had names. Every manager in the company from the top floor to the loading dock was enrolled in mandatory respect and dignity training, and Everett took the first session himself in the front row so no one could call it a punishment meant only for the little people. A new anti-discrimination policy went up on every wall. One page, plain language, no legal fog. It ended with a single line Brooke wrote herself. "No one who works here or walks through here is invisible." And a confidential reporting line went live that Friday, a real one answered by real people outside the chain of command. So the next person in a gray dress would never again depend on one brave 24-year-old with a shaking phone. Nora Whitfield was not fired. She was promoted. 2 weeks later, she became the company's first culture and dignity lead, a role that hadn't existed before her phone made it necessary. She got a raise, an office, and a mandate. Watch for the exact thing no one had watched for on the night of the gala. Trevor Callahan's story went the other way, and it went there on its own. Anderson Global never had to lift a finger against him. The clip did the work. No company in the city wanted the manager from the video. Everyone had seen it now, a man pouring soda on a woman smiling for the phones. He had built his whole career on the belief that no one would ever make him pay. It turned out the bill had just been waiting for an audience. Some people said that was too harsh. Brooke didn't think about him much at all. She was busy with the part that actually mattered. People kept asking Brooke the same question in the weeks that followed. Why the gray dress? Why show up to her own gala looking like no one and let it go that far? Her answer was always the same. "Because that's the only way you ever see the truth," she said. "The moment people know who I am, they behave. They hold the door. They smile. But that isn't respect. That's fear of the person with power. I don't want a company that's kind to the boss's wife. I want a company that's kind to the woman in the gray dress when they think no one important is watching." She and Everett kept their strange rule. Once a year, one of them still walks their own halls as a stranger. But now every person in that building knows it might be happening, and somewhere along the way, the pretending turned into the real thing. That was the whole point. Not to catch people being cruel. To make them practice being kind until it stopped being an act. A year later, almost to the day, Grace Holloway came back. She didn't announce it. She did exactly what Brooke had done. She showed up early in a plain coat and spent an afternoon walking the halls of Anderson Global as a nobody. She watched how the staff treated the cleaners, the couriers, the temps in gray dresses. Then she went to Everett's office, put the contract on his desk, and signed it. "You kept your word," she said. "I checked when no one was looking. That's the only test that counts." The $200 million came back, but by then it was almost the smallest thing that had changed. The young server from that night, the one who'd looked away, was one of the first people the new reporting line ever protected. He kept his job. He also kept his voice the next time it mattered. The soda stain came out of the marble in a day. The story it left behind did the opposite of fade. It became the thing new hires heard on their first morning, the quiet standard a whole company measured itself against. And it all started because one man was sure the woman in front of him didn't matter. One woman decided to show an entire room exactly how wrong that was. The story you just heard is fiction. Brooke, Everett, Trevor, none of them real. But the moment is. It happens every day wherever someone decides that a person in the wrong clothes doesn't count. Most of the time, no founder walks through the door. Most of the time, there is no camera and no reveal. Which means the only reveal that ever really protects people is the one that lives in us. It's the choice to treat the woman in the gray dress like she matters before we know her at all. So here's the question worth sitting with. The next time you're in that room when it's easier to look at your shoes, which one will you be? The 300 who stayed silent or the one who didn't? If this story moved you, leave a comment with your answer. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more.
Okay, real talk. I almost didn't even tell this one. Because the scary part isn't the guy with the soda. It's how many people just stood there, filming, doing nothing. And I've been that person. I've looked at my shoes when I should have said something. That's the part that keeps me up. Not the villains, but the silence of people like me. So I'm not posting this to make you feel bad. I'm posting it because next time I'm in that room, I want to be the one who says her name out loud. Look, I know it's just a story, but the feeling in it is real, and I think you know it too. And honestly, I really hope you will too.